Welcome back to All About Winning Daily Fantasy Sports. My name is Ty Patton. In this video, I'm going to share my research and strategy for the running back position in Week 8 of the NFL. In Week 7, I identified 6 of the 7 top scoring running backs in my player pool. Now, I did this by focusing on touches and snap percentages and correlating this with fantasy points expected. To better understand this, let's take a quick look back at Week 7. The top 5 projected running backs in Week 7 were Dalvin Cook, Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette, David Johnson, and Mack from Indianapolis. The actual top 5 scoring running backs were Chase Edmonds from Arizona with 38 points, Latavius Murray from New Orleans with 35 points, Dalvin Cook from Minnesota with 30.90 points, Austin Eckler from the Chargers with 28.50 points, and Leonard Fournette from Jacksonville with 19.50 points. Now, looking at the top scoring running backs, we can find the following numbers. These top 5 had 130 total touches. That was 113 carries and 17 receptions. They scored a combined 151.90 fantasy points. And that's with all things relevant. This averages out to 1.17 fantasy points per touch. When I'm building my lineups for DFS, I like to try to get a running back in the flex position. And if I use 3 running backs, then I'm aiming to get 65 or more touches between the 3 of them. In Week 7, if you would have used any combination of those top 5 scoring running backs, you would have got 67 or more targets in any combination. This shows the importance of identifying the running backs who are averaging the most touches, which also correlates with fantasy points expected. And that's what I'm trying to do when I'm breaking down all these numbers. These are the running backs who have received the top touches through the first 7 weeks of the NFL. In 7 games, Leonard Fournette leads the way with 172 touches. He's had 144 rushes, 28 receptions. It averages out to 24.57 touches per game. Next is Christian McCaffrey. In 6 games, he's had 162 touches, 127 rushes, 35 receptions, which actually comes out to 27 a game, which is actually more than Fournette as far as average a game, but Fournette has 10 more total because he's actually played 1 more game. Number 3 is Chris Carson from Seattle. He has 161 total touches, 139 rushes, 22 receptions, averages out to 23 a game. Derrick Henry from Tennessee has 142 touches. That's 135 rushes and 7 receptions, which averages out to 20.28 touches per game. Nick Chubb from Cleveland, 134 touches, 114 rushes with 20 receptions, comes out to 22.33 touches per game. Mack from Indianapolis has 129 touches, 119 rush, 10 receptions, comes out to 21.5 touches per game. And Le'Veon Bell has 129 as well. He's got 100 rushes with 29 receptions, 21.5 touches per game. These running backs have scored 866 fantasy points combined. And again, that's with all things relevant on 1,029 touches, which is 0.84 points per touch. Again, all things relevant. Now that is 0.33 lower than what the top 5 averaged in Week 7. But I do want to mention that if I only factored the top 5, it actually raises the average from 0.84 to 0.93 points per touch. Identifying the running backs with the highest snap percentage also allows you to target running backs that are not game script dependent. These are the top running backs with snap percentage. McCaffrey leads the way, 96%. Le'Veon Bell is next, 92%. Leonard Fournette, 91%. Nick Chubb, 77%. And Saquon Barkley, 73%. Now, I did want to mention real quick, just a quick reminder, I'm building lineups for the main slate, which means the players that are involved in all the primetime games on Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night aren't included. I do also do a showdown video on those for those games, Thursday, Sunday, and Monday nights. Now, these running backs are averaging the most fantasy points per game. We're going to put all this together. It all makes sense. McCaffrey, 31.7 fantasy points per game. Austin Eckler, 23.7 fantasy points per game. Nick Chubb, 22.4 fantasy points per game. Leonard Fournette, 19.1 fantasy points per game. And Alvin Kamara, 18.4 fantasy points per game. Now, I also want to target the running backs that have the more favorable matchups. These are the running backs with the best matchups in Week 8. Todd Gurley, facing Cincinnati. They're number 32 against the run. They are giving up 33.8 fantasy points per game to the running back position. Next is Saquon Barkley, facing Detroit. They are number 31. Detroit's giving up 32.7 fantasy points per game to the running back position. Next is Leonard Fournette. He faces the Jets. They are number 28. They are giving up 29.1 fantasy points per game to the running back position. Number 4 is Eckler and Gordon from the Chargers facing the Bears. The Bears are giving up 28.9 fantasy points per game, and they're number 26 against the run. And number 5 is Ty Johnson and McKissick from Detroit. They're facing the Giants, who are giving up 28.9 fantasy points per game to the running back position. They're tied to number 26 with the Bears. Now, likewise, I also want to identify the running backs with the least favorable matchups. These are the running backs that are in the least favorable matchup in Week 8. McCaffrey plays against San Francisco. They're ranked number 1. They're giving up 12.7 fantasy points per game to the running back position. Number 2 is Nick Chubb. He faces New England. New England's number 2. They're only giving up 13 fantasy points per game to the running back position. Number 3 is Henry, who faces Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is giving up 17.4 fantasy points per game to the running back position. They're ranked number 3. Number 4 is David Johnson and Edmonds from Arizona. They face New Orleans. New Orleans is giving up 18.6 fantasy points per game to the running back position. They're ranked number 4. And number 5 is Philip Lindsay and Royce Freeman from Denver. They face Indianapolis. Indianapolis is only giving up 20.4 fantasy points per game to the running back position. Now, using these measuring sticks, I will be targeting the following running backs in my lineups for Week 8. Leonard Fournette, he's $7,800. He's second in touches on this slate with 24.57 touches per game. The Jets allow 29.1 fantasy points per game to the running back position. They're ranked 29th. He's on the field. Gets 91% of the snaps. He's averaging 19.1 fantasy points per game. And keep in mind, he's only scored 1 touchdown. So that's all yards, receptions. If he starts getting some touchdowns, his scoring is definitely going to go up. And he's had 24 red zone carries. He's priced up $800, but he has a really good matchup this week. Again, I don't like that they raised his price. $800 from last week, and actually last week's matchup paper was better than this week's, but they are home, and I could see it. Now, the Jets did get some players back on defense, and that might affect that some, but based on just pure volume, you could see he's at least going to get value. So I have him at number 1. He's $7,800. Number 2 is Christian McCaffrey. He's $9,200. It's going to be hard to get up to McCaffrey at that price and build lineups this week, but that could be very contrarian. his ownership might be lower because of his price. Some people might be scared off because of the matchup with San Francisco, which is this very intriguing matchup. They're number one against the run, and McCaffrey's leading the way in fantasy points per game. They've only faced one really tough running back, and that was Chubb, and he was taken out of the game because of game script. They got a pretty big lead on Cleveland, and Chubb was phased out of the game because they had to pass the ball to try to get back in it. I told myself I was fading McCaffrey. I believe it was in the Jacksonville game. I was fading him, and after that, he scored 51 points. I told myself I would never fade him again. So I will have my share of him in some lineups somehow. Try to get creative with my builds. He's averaging, just on pure volume, 27 touches a game. He's on the field and getting 96% of the snaps. He's averaging 31.7 fantasy points per game. Again, San Francisco is the toughest defense against the run right now, so something's got to give. But based on volume alone and the fact, again, that he could be contrarian, I'll be watching the ownership on that. It could be really interesting. I will have some share of Christian McCaffrey. I won't ever just totally fade him. Next is Gurley. He's $7,400. He's facing the worst defense versus the run against Cincinnati, who's allowing 33.8 fantasy points per game to the running back position. He's 73% snap percentage. I'm going to watch the ownership on Gurley. He might be popular because of the prices of McCaffrey and Barkley, 9,200 and 8,900, might force people to go down to the low 7,000s for the running back position this week. In this game, you can see if they can run the ball and he's getting the majority of the touches. He hasn't really had a really big game yet. I do think they would have to throw the ball to him for him to get a little bit for him to get to value. But you can see a situation where him punching in a few touchdowns and getting value at $7,400. Next is Carson from Seattle. He's 7,000. He's averaging 23 touches a game. I'm going to like Carson a lot more if Ryan's out. If Ryan is in, I'm probably going to lean more towards Russell Wilson in the passing game. And my thought is that Atlanta will be able to put some points on the board and might cause this game to be a little bit higher scoring. Atlanta has been a little bit tougher against the run, so Seattle might have to go to the air, and they won't totally abandon Chris Carson, but I don't know that he gets value at 7,000, especially if Matt Ryan is playing. Next is Saquon Barkley. He's 8,900. Detroit is the second worst defense versus the run, giving up 32.7 fantasy points per game to the running back. He's probably going to be lower owned. I'm not crazy about his price because really he's averaging 20. I think it's 20. No, he's only averaging 17.8 fantasy points per game, and that is not value at $8,900. So he definitely needs to do a lot better than that, and he might get there with Detroit being so bad against the run. But Detroit's also going to know that they with the Giants passing game, they're probably going to have to lean on Barkley. Detroit knows that as well. So I'll just be watching his ownership. I'll be watching his ownership and McCaffrey's ownership. And if it looks like people are just spending down to spend up in other areas, I'll figure out a way to be creative and get some shares of McCaffrey and Barkley. Not in the same lineup. I don't know if that's possible, but at least in some different lineups. Next is Le'Veon Bell at $6,900. I'm hoping that recency bias will force people to force his ownership to go down. He's getting 92% of the snaps at the running back position. He's getting 21 and a half touches per game. Jacksonville's allowing 25.1 fantasy points per game to the running back position. He's actually one of my favorite plays this week. I think they're going to be able to move the ball with him, and I don't think they'll be. He's not game script dependent, so he's going to be on the field, and I just feel at his price, I definitely feel like he's one of the running backs that's going to be able to get value this week, and definitely want him in my player pool. Mac from Indianapolis, $6,100. He's a home favorite. He's going to have probably lower ownership, getting 21 and a half touches per game. And I just really I see a lot of value with him at that price, the 6,100. Denver's a little stingy in versus the pass, but they're ranked 25th against the run. And I like that Mac doesn't really share. Nyheim Hines gets some passes out of the backfield, some of the third down action, but pretty much it's Mac. And then if they get in the red zone, it's Mac. And I like him as a small home favorite. I don't really like any of the running backs that are below 6,000. I might have some interest in Latavius Murray if Kamara is held out again. And Ty Johnson from Detroit. He's 4,900. He could possibly have really high ownership, kind of like the Lazard deal last week at wide receiver for Green Bay. Kind of like that deal where supposedly they didn't have any receivers and he was going to be the next thing since best thing since sliced bread. But I'll be watching his ownership. He could be a value for Detroit with Kerryon Johnson now out on injured reserve. So summing up the running back targets in Week 8, the following running backs will be in my player pool: Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Todd Gurley, Carson from Seattle, Saquon Barkley, Le'Veon Bell, Mac from Indianapolis, and I do have some interest in Latavius Murray and Ty Johnson Murray, depending on Kamara. I want to thank you for joining me. I encourage you to drop any or write any opinions or comments below. If you'd please hit that like button, the subscribe button, the notification bell so you get notified when my next video posts. I really appreciate it. I'll be posting wide receiver tomorrow and tight end defense special team tomorrow. And then Saturday, we'll put all this together and build some lineups, take a look at what the optimizer is doing with it, look at some ownership and check in on injuries and do all that, and do a game by game breakdown. Again, thanks for joining me. My name is Ty Patton. This is all about winning daily fantasy sports, and I'll see you real soon.